Okay, so we're going to talk about the stress quotient today. Has anybody had experience with stress quotient?
Yes.
So it is the redheaded stepchild of TTI assessments, and the thing I get a kick out of is I had a conversation with David Bonstetter. Oh God, probably a year ago, and I was asking for mean information, not mean information, but the information on the population means. And so he started pulling up the means, and gave me all these statistics which I couldn't read and didn't want to read and all that kind of stuff. But the truth was that over the 5-year history of the stress quotient being around, only 10,000 of them have been done.
Wow.
I know I've done at least 2,500 personally. So I'm the one who has become really fond of the stress quotient, and so I want to talk about the stress quotient because it is one of my favorite, because a lot of companies measure engagement. I know that we've got what's the assessment we do, not the TTI assessment, but the one that was the Baldrige.
Dialogue.
Yeah. So that's a diagnosis piece. What I find from engagement is a lot of companies use engagement and engagement surveys, and especially the Gallup 12 for diagnosing and saying, okay, where does it hurt, and where do we want to find different things. Very few people are measuring stress, and what I find also is that most people who you do a stress assessment on have no clue where they're stressed, and they don't really understand what the effects of stress are. So the really cool part about the individual report is it says, okay, here's where it hurts. There are 7 different indices and 2 or 3 factors of each of the indices that says, okay, this is where it hurts. But then the last couple of pages of the report is, okay, what's it doing to you? So I want to share an individual report, but then I also want to say, okay, how do we aggregate for larger organizations? Because for Haskell, I did this last year with Haskell, and I think we had an N factor of 820 plus, where we sliced and diced the information by group, by department, by subsection, but then we were able to run an aggregate to say, okay, and this was in the middle of the pandemic, so we wanted to it was August of 2020 when we ran it. We wanted to be able to take a look into a company rather than looking at engagement. It's taking a kind of look at the other side, which is stress. And what we found is that they were handling stress pretty well, but there are some commonalities. So let me share my screen. And I just saw some, dialogue. Thank you, Tom. Could you let me screen share? Okay, thanks. This is an individual stress assessment that was done by a guy that I'm doing a 360 on. So when I do 360s, I do a 360 instrument that is provided by TTI, but I also do stress and a Trimetrics HD and an EQ. But this is the stress that he did. What you talk about is on the first page is the summary of all the indices. So there is a total of 7 indices. And what I'm looking for here is those things that are above 40, because they're going to give me an idea of where it hurts, where they're really stressed. The reason it's above 40 is if you see in the legend, that's at the bottom left of the page. 0 to 20 is little or no, 21 to 40 is limited, then 41 gets to elevated, and so on, significant and severe. So for this particular gentleman, look at where he is in job security index. He is at 83, which signifies severe stress. He's above 40 in just about every other one other than demands. Now, I'm going to want to do a little bit deeper dive into what that means. So the next page is the stress factor demand. So we know up here that the demands index shows 33. Here's the page that says, okay, demands index 33, it's made up of time management. In other words, how stressed are they by the amount of time that they have, or the competency job match, which is how close to the job do they feel their talents bring them. Well, if I take a look at Haskell overall, time management is a huge issue, competency job match is not. But in this particular case, it's probably something to comment on, but there are other areas that are going to hurt more. So this, I probably wouldn't spend too much time on this. Where I would spend time is like, oh yeah, so now in effort reward balance, even though it shows 69, 83 for workplace meaningfulness. So he's severely stressed in understanding the meaning of what he's doing. I mean, is it really working? So when in a coaching conversation or in a conversation in a 360, I'm going to spend a lot of time on trying to understand what he is missing. Yeah, Doug, I saw you raise your hand.
Yep, thanks, Chip. So if we did a TTI on this, I would expect his role awareness to be tanking. Is that?
Could very well be. Yeah, in fact, I have his I have his report.
And I would also expect there to be a pretty big mismatch between his economic value and what I'm seeing on the
Yeah, his role awareness is way down.
And negative bias on top of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's a flight risk.
Yep. There's your engagement story, Chip, right there.
Yep.
Disengagement, I should say.
Yeah, and he's really high commanding. Oh my God, he's off the chart high commanding. Wow.
But that doesn't make him a bad person as another high commanding individual.
Well, as a high commanding individual to another high commanding individual, you know, it's Linda heard me say this at a seminar where I said for us, we're supposed to have colleagues. People of high commanding don't have colleagues, we have competitors. We want to step on their necks as we walk over, and it pisses us off when somebody else takes business from us, even though it's self-inflicted. But anyway, do you remember that, Linda? I guess not.
She's all stepping on somebody's neck, Chip.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yes, I did, Chip. Thank you.
So as you look at each one of these, then okay, control is workplace involvement. So he's feeling that he has no involvement with or ability to influence the people around him, which must drive a high commanding nuts. This one, organizational vision. So he's thinking that there is no vision of where the organization is going. 75 management awareness. Now, what I get a kick out of is, and you'll see this in the Haskell aggregate numbers. Haskell aggregate numbers show that most people love their bosses. But what he's saying is that his manager, who is the guy that ordered the 360, has no clue what he's doing. I think that's interesting. And then social support, frustration. You know, frustration is not being able to kill somebody that is so richly deserves it, and especially being high commanding is that as well. I was trying to be funny. I didn't hear any laughter,
I
but
thought it
anyway.
was funny. I was
Well,
laughing.
I
good,
laughed.
good,
I
I
laughed.
good.
I gave you a muted
Thank you,
smile,
Mark.
Chip.
Yeah, thanks, thanks. So look at this. He's at 100 for opportunity. So he doesn't feel like there's any opportunity to move up, which is another reason that he's doing the 360. So you take a look at he's kind of a mess. I mean, he's a stress monkey, and it's tough. And so then you take a look at okay, where are the symptoms? Well, he's not showing any symptoms. So the statement that he eats stress for breakfast is probably pretty apt with him. So he's either eating it
Yeah.
and it's not coming out, or he handles it very well.
Or he's going to drop dead of a heart attack someday.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Probably very true. Probably very true. So that's what the individual report says. And then when we take a look at the aggregate, this is again, this is done August of 2020. It has the group stress index summary, which tells you, since it's 824 reports that were all blended into one, it tells you that there are some places where there's smoke, but what this is going to tell you is then the next page is, okay, where's the distribution? So 24% are feeling little or no stress in demands, 37% are limited, 28% are elevated, 9% are significant, and 2% are severe. So 2% out of 800 people is what, 16? So there are 16 people that are having severe stress from the demands index, and mostly out of time. And this is a very handy way, instead of looking at the aggregate. So if you look at the aggregate, there's nothing to see here. If you look at the individual ones, then you say, oh, wow. So what you're saying is 41% of the, is that right?
Yep, just about.
39% of the Haskell population of 800 people are feeling significant or more stress in demands. And this gives you a really, so what I was talking about manager supervisor index before, 63% are showing little or no stress, and 88% are showing little or limited stress. So what you find from that is most people really like their boss. And 2% of the people who took this said that they're having a really difficult time. So 16 people are having a difficult time. And if you triangulate these results with engagement, you often find the people that are managing units that the engagement is low are also higher in stress. So those 16 people are in a couple of different departments and are working for a couple of particular managers.
Hey, Chip,
Now,
do you think that those people are at a level within the organization of 800 people that have more responsibility and therefore more stress to go along with it?
might be in demands index, but you won't see that with. In fact, when I did the management group by themselves, and I did one strictly for, they have this thing called the ELT. It's the group presidents and the COO, CFO, CHRO, and CEO. So there's 9 people in the ELT. When I did that, it was like they're chilling like villains. Which, knowing the organization, I can understand why, but they're a design build construction firm, and so there is so much deadline pressure on the people that are doing projects that's well, and here's the demand index. So taking a look at time management is an issue when you've got 48% of the population that is experiencing elevated or above. That's an area of concern. I don't know if it's an area of concern as much as it's a part of the job.
Chip, did this information, how did senior management, when they got this result from you, I assume that's where you started your feedback, what was the reaction?
The reaction was an understanding. So they wanted to understand what everything meant first, and then what they wanted to do from there is they wanted to parse the information. And one of the things that always happens is that people tend to look, yeah, but 52% said they're limited or no. Well, yeah, but 48% say that there's problem, and oh, by the way, 20% are pretty severe.
Yeah, significant and severe. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's an area that, and believe me, the construction business has been crazy the last couple of years, and people are working their butt off. Haskell has been extremely effective. When I started working with them 12 years ago, they had 600 employees. They're going to top out at about 2,000 this year, and probably 1,000 of them have been added in the last year and a half. You talk about a cultural challenge. When you add that many people. Now, to get to the mechanics of this, there are a couple of versions on when you go on to IDS that you can assign. So there is an individual one that gives the individual results like I showed for Allen's. There is a leader version which doesn't ask as many, okay, you're working for someone kind of questions. And so the leader version asks a little bit different questions. It gives kind of the same results, but the way the algorithms work is slightly different, and it makes people feel like they're a leader of that. And then there is a general version or a confidential version. So I think for me at my pricing level, it might be $2 or $3 that if you do it on an organization. So for 800 people in Haskell, it was a couple of bucks each to run the reports. And then you can do all the slicing and dicing behind the scenes, and that doesn't cost you anything. I think these cost 11 or 12 bucks, maybe a little bit more, to run those on an individual. But you have that option. So if you want to do it on a department, or you want to do it on a small company or a large company or whatever, you can do it. Now the only downside of this is that the mechanism. So like if you do a Gallup engagement report, Gallup has it so you can feed your payroll data in, and they will slice and dice the reports for you. This one you have to slice and dice the report. So I did reports on each department, but each one was a separate link. So there was one department I did. They have a consumer products group, and I did 42 links for that group because they wanted to slice and dice it. They have, I don't know, they have probably 600 or 700 people that work in that department. So they wanted to slice and dice it. So TTI is really good about individual assessments. When you get into large groups, it's a little bit wonkier. That's the only limitation. If you're willing to do it, if you're willing to do the background, and I have an admin that knows how to do all this, it's a lot easier. But for a small project, it's pretty easy. And I really like the. I did one for a company for a department of a company up in Wisconsin that had 17, and we did the confidential version, and it worked out really well, and it was just one link. But we got really good data out of that, and we're able to work with leaders of that department and help fix some things. So anyway,
Hey, Chip,
yeah.
Up until the last sentence or so, I thought I understood the difference between the individual version and the confidential version, but now I'm not so convinced that I do. Would you walk me through that differentiation one more time?
They're the same reports, so you get the same data. It's just one is a confidential report, and practically it costs nothing to run, compared with the individual report, which costs some more to run. The individual report is a little bit more descriptive in the text that they use, because it's meant to be used with somebody like in a coaching situation or in a consulting situation, versus the bigger report, which is used to be is more to be used. And Lemansky has a horror story, so that'll be good. I always like horror stories, although it's past Halloween, so can you really tell one? Anyway, so that's really the biggest difference.
Chip, is the confidential version mostly for us versus for the company?
No, it's mostly for the company, because what your idea is, people love to take confidential assessments, right? And so if you're doing a 360 assessment, you want to make sure that everybody feels like it's confidential, so their feedback is honest. Sometimes it's a little bit harsher because it is confidential, but at least they're being honest. And so the confidential version allows the people to hide behind the assessment. Versus, and so what I like for Gallup with their engagement survey, they won't dice it any lower than 5 people.
It's
They won't
kind of
do
like
it.
what we do with dialogue.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah. Okay,
Thanks.
Lemansky, what's your horror story?
Once upon a time, I was approached by a large company with an opportunity to do a lunch and learn at their downtown Chicago office. And I spoke to the leaders of the group, and however we got there, we came to the conclusion that it might be insightful to have the people that volunteered to come to this lunch and learn, they're mostly marketing people, to take a assessment of some kind. In hindsight, I wish I had done DISC, but we live and learn. And you'll hear why I wish I had. And I was told by my contact that you're going to love this group. They are so interactive, and it's going to be wonderful. So here's where I went wrong. I had, 35, 40 people at this lunch and learn, and almost all of them had taken the stress, had their own individual stress report. And I had their group figures, though I didn't have the whole group. Where I went bad, this is one of the longest hours I've ever had standing in front of the room. There were 2 bosses in the room. And I started, so how might this be an issue here? Okay, yeah. Next slide. Same thing. They hated me. How come you were terrible? I go, well, yeah, I guess I was. Yeah. And this was the first time I wasn't real familiar. So, everybody's stress report reads a little bit different in terms of the individual one. It does have suggestions for this level of success. And so I don't know what everyone's individual report says. And so I'm working in the dark here. And I was ill prepared. They were right about that. And so they don't want me back, and I'm not sure I want to go back, and it would have been good if it had gone better. And that's just my horror story.
We always learn, don't we? We always learn. In fact, we learn from our mistakes a lot more than we learn from our successes.
And so
So,
since I had the mistake, I thought I would share that mistake so that you maybe won't go down that path.
thank you, Tom.
And I had no, I didn't know anyone in this group, so there was no rapport, there's no relationship going into this. The Haskell people know, like, and trust you. These people, well, they no longer or trust. They know me now. They don't like or trust me. So goodbye.
Yeah, they're not going to invite you to a Cubs game, right?
I have my own tickets.
Yeah, exactly. So what to kind of put brackets on the end of this, it took about 2 years of talking them into doing this. When we finally did it, then it was almost 2 months of debriefing. So I debriefed small groups, I debriefed large groups. I was in this during COVID, so I was on a huge number of webinars. I was on, so one of the departments, the INT group, had about 250 people, and so I was on a webinar with the leaders from that group. So there were 17 leaders from that group, and then I got into it and did each individual group. So each individual manager, I did their group, and so I debriefed it with 250 people over the course of about a month. So it's one thing to collect the data. It's another thing to actually make it powerful and have the data sink in. And in fact, so if over the last year, Cleveland knows this, but over the last year, they've really ramped up the learning and development engagement group. They've hired a manager of engagement, and she's marvelous. But she has done a deep dive on measuring the gallup information, the engagement data, and the stress report, and come up with a lot of correlations, which is something that I probably would never want to do because it's like too brainy. So any questions?
I was just going to say, Chip, that our experience, we haven't done 2,500 reports yet, but our experience certainly, and particularly one company was in my head as you were showing me this data, because 70% of this company was in significant or severe stress, all 60 of their employees. It was really a mess. And it was a family-owned, really dysfunctional business, needless to say. And there's lots of correlations. So looking at the data from stress and then looking back at the trimetrics and looking at, various factors like the low role awareness, the negative role awareness is a beautiful example, of correlating this information and then moving them to action somehow. So if you don't, I can remember this group, it was 5 family members that were all co-managers of this company. That'll tell you how severe their structure was. But they were stunned by the negative information just about their own group. And then had us do everybody else. And then had us interview every employee that wanted to be interviewed. And so there was no mistake about the seriousness of the stress of the people that worked in this organization. They chose the president, who was the main culprit, chose to do nothing about it. They buried it. But nonetheless, the evidence was there. It was out there. And striating that information is very valuable, because it is what it is. The people are telling you how they're feeling. So it's like a dialogue. It's really good information if you use it. And I think it's one of the best tools and underutilized tools that TTI has come out with.
It's the redheaded stepchild.
Yeah.
It really is. And I don't know why people are afraid of it, but maybe they just don't know. They don't know what to do with it. I had to do a lot of digging on my own to be able to debrief it and understand anecdotally what it means.
Absolutely. So. And to Tom's point, using this in a mixed group, people that don't know each other, is probably not the best. As you learned, of course, experience is a hard teacher, but a good teacher, but it's a tough place to show that group result when it's not relatable necessarily. Maybe it is if it's one company.
This
And of
was
course,
still relatable, but whatever. There was the wrong audience and the wrong guy.
right, because you had the bosses the overlords standing there with the serfs. Yeah, I got it. I think I interrupted Mike. I think it was Mike that going to say something.
Yeah, so I got a couple of questions. The first one is, what does it take to access the report? I just tried to add the link in my TTI and I couldn't do it.
Hold on just a second. Let me pull up my, I can do this.
Probably not one of the reports that was sent down to his account, so he has to request it, I think.
So do I have to request it? Do I have to get trained? Yeah, I don't have anything like that.
There's no certification.
Or is
No,
it?
there's no certification. So if
I just have to
I
call
take,
up, one of the people at TTI and say, hey, please add this.
yeah, but if you want to create a new link,
That's what I did.
it's right here under emotional intelligence and stress.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I didn't look deep enough into it. Okay.
So there's a stress quotient anonymous. So that's it doesn't provide an individual report. All you get is the aggregate. Stress quotient individual and stress quotient leader. Those are the three different reports that you get.
Okay, I only see one on mine. It's just like stress quotient, TTI emotional quotient. No, I can't pull it. How do you pull up stress?
It's under emotional intelligence and stress.
Yeah, okay. So when I click on that, I just get emotional quotient, TTI emotional quotient.
Really?
I don't think they've dropped that report down to his account.
Yeah, okay. I'll call him about that. Hey, the second question, Chip, is what's the basis for the assessment? Is it a combination of other assessments, or is it something unique? And did TTI develop it, or is it come from someone else? That kind of thing.
Yeah, TTI developed it. I don't know what the intellectual underpinnings of it are, and I probably ought to ask it. I just really loved it, but I know that that's something that Dr. Ron and Dave worked on for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years before they produced it.
Mhm.
So.
All right, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
For those that have used it, and this, I get where you're coming from, Chip. You probably use it multiple different ways, but is this something you lead with, or or are you making it part of the standard TTI assessment? Or do you go solo and say, hey, are you concerned about stress? Or someone said they're concerned about stress in their organization, and this was your starting point, and then you backed in with other things once you got a reading there?
It's never been a starting point for me. Jerry, how about you?
We, in fact, did a public stress workshop and marketed a workshop, a free webinar, and then spun off of that with some people and did stress was the lead in. You have to be careful with that, Cleveland, because you're going to show them more than likely bad news. More than likely there's stress everywhere, but you have the potential, like I did, of severe stress in an organization. So now you got to deal with that. So you have to be ready to deal with that. So it really depends. Now we use it also when we do an executive review. So a company wants to take a toll of their executive team. So we do trimetrics, we do EQ and SQ. And it really gives us a pretty full picture of who we're dealing with and what's going on with that person. And
Yeah.
That's been useful for us.
Jerry, that's what I do as well. So like for every 360 I do, for the leadership series that I do, the leadership academy that I do for them and for other companies. I always do a stress quotient, and then I'm able to run a group stress. So you can run a group stress on the individual reports, or you can run group stress on the anonymous reports, and or you can do it on the leader reports too. You can run group stress anyway. But when you aggregate the totals, then it's a lot easier to talk about the totals with others. But you know, I wouldn't see that you would lead with that. You know, if I think back to how we get business, it's the question of you know, where does it hurt? How can we help? And usually it starts off somewhere else, the leadership academy, coaching, or whatever, and then you know the company says, well, you know, I'm having an issue with this department. Well, have you taken a look and done any diagnosis? And then it becomes more of a natural part of the conversation. Is that helpful, Cleveland?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
Okay, Doug, I saw your hand up, and then Tom.
So just to build off of that, I think you just answered this part of the question just with your last answer. What you just prompted me to think about is, with the great resignation underway, I can't help but wonder whether the SQ is going to be a predictor of the great resignation at any one particular company.
Good. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that makes sense.
And I had thought of those statistics, you know, that there's a statistic that just came out that 52% of employees will leave their jobs and look for new work. 52%. Boy, that is a huge, huge number. So there's lots of this disengagement going on. And there's also, TTI is working on a group hybrid of this system with another one of the value-added associates in the network. They hope to have that out by their conference in January.
Yeah,
so-
Robert Sikora is the one that, and it's not a stress, it's an engagement survey.
Yeah, it's
And the
engagement.
the one thing I really love about their assessment is that, so Gallup has its 12 questions, and some of the questions are kind of wonky, like I have a best friend at work, and nobody gets that. Nobody understands what the hell they mean by I have a best friend at work. So what this does is it asks individual questions, team questions, and organization questions. So they take the Gallup 12 and they split it into 36 different questions. And they match more or less to the Gallup questions, but I love the fact that it's almost like intrinsic, extrinsic, systemic. So the individual questions, the team questions, the organization, because I may feel differently about the organization, but I may feel that I'm perfectly engaged, and I may feel that my team's perfectly engaged, but there's a problem with the organization. So this is, I love, Robert Zikora's been talking to us lately about this and about the assessment. He's really excited about it.
Yeah.
So. Tom?
So for those of you new to TTI, occasionally they have opportunities. Sometimes if you attend the conference, there are opportunities to where you will get a free month of a particular tool. Or when they have reformatted a particular tool, they will give you a period of free usage. And there was a time they did this with stress. And one of my mantras I learned from someone else in the network: if it's free, it's for me. And so I added to my monthly email blast a little, here's a free stress assessment. And I've done this before with other assessments, and it's surprising, when you put a low price tag on something like that, you'd think it would attract, but sometimes, people have the opinion that you get what you pay for. So the level of engagement with that free offer was not all that great. And I down the road. However, I did have one person that took it and sent me a thank you email. This is one of the most valuable things you've ever shared.
Yeah. Yeah. They had Dr. Izzy Justice is the guy who put the EQ assessment together. And Izzy is a guy who lives here in Charlotte. He got tired of dealing with emotional intelligence, so he did a deep dive on happiness. And in 2019, he brought a happiness assessment to TTI. Now, nothing's ever been done with a happiness assessment. I actually loved it. I think for me, like I got as a part of the beta testing, and I think close to 300 people took it, and it was fascinating to me. I would have loved to have seen them take that a little bit further, but it's based on a lot of the Marty Seligman and the work that's been done at Penn with Marty Seligman, Angela Duckworth, Sean Acor, that group of people. So.
It's another, I think sometimes, as you talk about the stress being a bit of a stepchild, they find safety in numbers for, they're looking for statistical validation at TTI. Yep. And if there aren't big numbers and they can't get large numbers, they're going to be reluctant to really promote it or sponsor it, if you will.
Yep. So anyway.
So my question to the three folks that it seemed like they've used this quite a bit. How close of a correlation, and I guess I'm using that word very gingerly, how close of a correlation is there between EQ and SQ? I mean, I would think some areas where some of the things, as Chip was kind of going through the report pretty high speed, some of the stuff where those stressors are kind of off the chart, I would expect that to either play out as either low self-regulation or low, social awareness or something. I would expect to see some kind of parallels there.
We have seen a correlation between low motivation on the EQ report and high stress.
Well, that makes sense.
People are stressed out and they're just not motivated anymore. They are burnt. It goes along with, with disengagement, they're just burned out, and it's kind of like, what's the use? What's the point? And so we've seen that, self-regulation to me ties more to behavioral issues, not completely, but it's certainly true often, right? That certain styles really are not as regulated as other styles, right?
Yeah, I see a lot more correlation from the EQ to the Acumen Capacity Index. Mm-hmm. If someone has a huge high understanding others, and a low social awareness, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. And you can draw a lot of inferences from that they really love other people, but and I don't know if that's correlative. And the one thing you got to remember about the EQ with motivation is that motivation measures intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. Right. So it's how much I really love the work, rather than I'm in it for the money and or I'm in it for the knowledge, or I'm in it for the power, or whatever. And if I'm not getting that, then that's a problem, and that's probably going to dim my motivation. Oh.
So look at workplace meaningfulness, for example, in the
exactly. And workplace empowerment, frustration. I often see a correlation between frustration and what's the other one? I already shut it down, but you often see frustration and what was the other one? It's in the same box. Anyway, when you work with it enough, you do pick up the anecdotal correlations.
And Chip, wouldn't you say that the story here is, for anybody that hasn't used it, is go use it? Go use it. Find a group of people you can work with and go use it and get experience with it. Give it away. Go use it, because you begin then to understand whether it has any value to your practice. That's really the question, isn't it? It's a tool. And how does that tool connect with what else you're doing, right?
It also sounds, Jerry, I certainly understand that. It also sounds like, though, you better be sure that there's some commitment from people at the top of the house to do something with that
Oh, you bet.
before you take it. Because I
Well-
mean, that was one of the things that I used to have a conversation with people about. Not that I've sold a lot of dialogue, but the one thing I'm always cognizant of is you don't know what those x-rays are going to actually reveal. And you better be damn well comfortable with whatever it says. To use a Sleppenism, you're not going to pay the doctor $5 and ask him to touch up the x-rays. It is what it is, baby. And so you better have a plan to be able to deal with that. Up to and including the old rationalization. Well, they probably just didn't understand the question. Because I've had to have that conversation more than once with a company CEO. Say, well, if you look at this question, and this question, and the consistency, I don't think it's that they didn't understand the question. I think it's you don't like their answers. But you got to be able to, kind of have that unfettered conversation.
Right.
That conversation.
Right, Doug. And worse than that is if the company does nothing with the information. They don't feed it back to the people. They don't try to make some value out of knowing what they now know and doing something about the situation that they find themselves in. That's the worst of it. Dialogue certainly falls into that category, and certainly stress quotient does too.
Yeah. This is a link. If you want to take it, please go ahead and take it. It's the stress link, and please, don't give it to your neighborhood or your group. Nancy, I see your hand. I'll get to it in just a second, but I'll go ahead and send this link out to the people who are on here. And if you want to take the stress assessment, please do.
You want to just put it in chat? Is that what you're going to do? Or you're going to send?
Yeah,
it
I can
separately?
put that in chat. So let me do that. Nancy.
Just a couple of things. First of all, Chip, I want to thank you for providing this great overview of this tool. I'm one of the people who just became familiar with TTI this year when we made the switch. And I am, all honesty, not all that familiar with the tools. I'm still in that learning process. And so I could see, I think for me, it'll be really helpful to master the basics and then keep this one in my back pocket, knowing it's there, and I might identify an organization that could use it. So thank you so much for, all I ever saw was this was a name out there. I had no clue what was included in the report. So I appreciate that. Now, to kind of what Mike said, though, in terms of finding things on the TTI site, I'm going to share with you. I called them Friday. There's a question I had about billing, and I ended up talking to Cassandra. And she literally spent an hour with me, putting all the things in the right places for the link, so that all I got to go is, copy that link and send it out. She even renamed them for me. I don't have to worry about trimetrics, blah, blah, blah. Mine says disc, driving forces, and EQ. Remember. And then she created a short report so that I'm not giving away to farm. So they were really, really helpful. So I just wanted to share that. And then one other thing is kind of not dealing with this call, but I didn't get to say it last week at Power Summit when we were celebrating, because I didn't see Linda there on Friday. But I wanted to acknowledge Linda for being instrumental in my growth in the network. Because the one thing I can count on her, I don't think she's ever missed a quarterly or a Power Summit that I've been there. I mean, it's like, we need to see other people really embrace it. So Linda, I just wanted to say that to you. I really appreciate that.
I have one question for something that I've got coming up. With Intermetrics, Jay had once sent me the equivalent of a PowerPoint to do a group debrief on the elements of a disc or whatever, but it was a separate PowerPoint, not unlike what he used to use to train a gazillion years ago. Is part of what we got as part of our training, is there equivalent of a PowerPoint or a PDF that's already done in terms of walking people through this group debrief?
Yes, I can answer that.
And is that on their site, or was it something that I was supposed to have?
It's on the site. There's one for everything. The one I couldn't find was the emotional quotient, and I called. They pointed me to it, and actually had emailed it to me before I got off the phone. Which I would just further echo what Nancy's saying. I've never called in there and someone not gone above and beyond whatever I was asking for, and they took care of it right there on the phone.
Okay.
So they do exist. They're both.
They behave just like.
But
Yeah, they behave just like trusted advisors. There's so many similarities.
yeah,
With how they fall all over you trying to help you. They
That's
really do. And that's one thing that attracted me to them many, many, many years ago. It's the same culture.
Now, I did find out, by the way, if any of you were working with Thomas DeGennaro, he's gone. He went off to find his way in the acting field.
Yeah.
So I'm told that at some point, that's what Cassandra told me. So I'm waiting for a new business development person, but he wants to be an actor, so he left us.
Yeah, I'm having lunch with him on Wednesday,
Oh.
Nancy. He's a great kid, just a great kid, and I'm going to hear all about his first acting gig. So
Yeah, he has to share it with everyone.
it's
Is he moving to LA?
no, he got something here in Phoenix, and so I can't wait to find out what it is. It'll be interesting. He's a very, very bright kid. It was clear to me right from the beginning he was in the wrong place in the wrong job. It was not the right thing for him. No. So we learn these things as we go along, right? We can see it. Yeah. And it never really ever took. Not really.
All right. Lemansky, I'm probably going to see you in January, right?
Chip, we've covered this before, but I appreciate being able to say it again. I will be in Switzerland skiing.
Right. So I brought that up just because I wanted you to say you'd be in Switzerland skiing. But usually we have a trusted advisors group that gets together for dinner at the TTI conference, and so in the past years, Chris Sopa has been there, and and Joni Fletcher, and Sherry Roth, and Tom has been a part of that. Who else?
Barry Barnhart,
Yeah.
Lawrence Hansen, I think.
Gary Sorrell.
Right.
So it's always better to be a has-been than never was. So it's all of us has-beens hang around there, and it's a great time. So anyway.
Look to each other for an hour and go away.
Yeah. Wendy, that's all I got, unless anybody else has anything.
Any last questions? Just a comment for Nancy. Nancy, yes, I was not at Power Summit on Friday.
Right.
Because I actually managed to attend almost all of 2 simultaneous conferences.
I was impressed with you doing that, Linda, but I wanted to acknowledge you there, and then I'm waiting and then fighting because
I wasn't there.
You truly, I've been in the network for 15 years now, and I cannot remember either going to a quarterly or going to a Power Summit that you're not there. And that's even more meaningful to me because I'm tired. This is my soapbox, Wendy. So I'm tired of the people who only show up at these events if they're a speaker. And they have to pay to travel, or you have to pay to travel. You have clients, and you're always there. So I wanted to acknowledge you for that. It's really helpful for people in the network to see someone like that.
And I have a question, Linda. Would you call that multi-conferencing? Is that what that's called?
I think so. One was